So you're live.
Awesome. We're ready to get started for the, what's today? June 28th meeting of the City of Inglewood Budget Advisory Committee. And a happy primary day to all. Starting with attendance, Josh Newell, Chair, present.
Suzanne Dirksen.
Jennifer Nolan, Budget Administrator present.
Tyson Thornburg, Budget and Financial Analyst present.
Jackie Lowe, Finance Director present.
And James Surratt, Budget Advisory Committee present.
Peter Eckel, Budget Advisory Committee present. Minky John present.
And into the virtual world.
Bill Lesage.
Sean Lewis, City Manager present.
Tim Dodd, Assistant City Manager.
Awesome. Perfect. Up first, approval of the May 24th meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
Aye. Yes.
Second.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those approved. New business tonight. Got a couple of things to work on. We still need to wrap up our capital projects. Thank you to City Council for your patience on it. Sorry we didn't quite get it out in time, but we will get that wrapped up tonight and get something over there. We'll have a chance to kind of talk about the process, our feelings about it, things that we've learned, what we want to try and think about moving into the next cycle to be ready for next year. I think having a debrief there. And then we'll move into talking about the annual report. So the annual report is our big deliverable to City, due August 1st. This year, it's kind of our opinions, our thoughts based off of the last year, everything we've heard, what we want to do to suggest that the city does with their wider budget and what to take our information to move forward with. So that's the plan for tonight, and then we'll of course move into members' choice. So with that, starting on the capital projects, the last email I think that came out, we had started to put in our own categories of how the budget should be assigned. I think the recommendation from Jenny was to aggregate those and provide all of our thoughts to council along with a summary based off of the average. Is anybody against that approach? What are your thoughts on that approach for our final kind of numbers?
I'm not against it. I mean, I don't know what some of the issues could be if we decide to do that, if anybody has.
So as I think about it, it's the complexity of every year. The pie's a certain size and the needs are much greater than that. And there's an element where I feel this combined approach saying it's not universal, but like generally speaking, like Suzanne, I loved your summary of like the prioritization, match ADAD projects, like this is what we care about, but ultimately we're arguing one good thing over another good thing, it feels like at the end of the day. And that's just a really difficult position to be in. And are we really confident once we get down to the minor dollars of that argument versus kind of saying, you know, this is how we feel as a group, here's a summary of it, and here's the direction that we want to provide in the letter. And I think it's mostly the things that you typed up about the ADA focus, the matching funds, things like that. So in terms of wrapping it up, I'm kind of partial to that. I think it does the best exemplifying the situation that we currently are in.
Josh, are you aware that we increased the available funding from 8 million to 8,650,000?
No.
Okay, let me recap everything. Last time we did a great job. I think we came down to $844,000. We had a great conversation, and Councilmember Russell cannot stop giving you raving review because she says she learned a lot through the process. For me, I feel if our thought process is right, our decision will be right. So she cannot stop just complimenting how great this process is. So last time we had a number, 844,000, but at the time we knew we had only 8 million because usually we have 5 million, but because we receive a large plan review fee, we're able to allocate 3 million. Then when the city staff discussed about the projects, we reviewed the 2022 first quarter capital project. We talked about if we could delay or repurpose some of the funding. We did.
Okay.
So we identified additional $650,000. So now we have $8,650,000. That may make this committee job easier.
That would, so that gives us a couple options, because I think
Yeah.
that, I know with the ADA, we were cutting on some of those. There was conversations back and forth about the IT. Those were the areas that I see opportunity for. Two ways to approach it. We all commit to by tomorrow going in on the spreadsheet with the 8.6 million as a new bogey and putting in our own opinions, aggregating it, or we open it up to a group discussion. I would say I'm still on we put in our own numbers and aggregate it, because I don't know if the group discussion will provide a lot more benefit in terms of the time it would take, but I do want to keep it open to everyone's thoughts on it.
I agree with that approach.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. So are you guys comfortable? Go ahead, Bill.
I was just gonna say, I think I don't know who was there from council, or maybe Sean hasn't, but it almost seems to me of having that aggregated approach of everybody's view gives council a little bit of view of kind of from the citizen perspective, right? And where, there's some between the, the group of us, but where there's, where there are some disagreements or where people feel differently, it kind of presents that view to them.
Mhm.
A little different perspective than just one single view.
That's great. I cannot speak on behalf of other committees, but like Planning and Zoning Commission has been reviewing CIP for quite a few years. So they have a very balanced approach. But Inglewood Transportation, E-TAC, Transportation Advisory Committee, they didn't allocate 1 cent for IT or anything else, because they feel my goal is to focus on transportation. And I want to fund ongoing project first, then one time, and nothing for IT. But that's their purpose. So Budget Advisory Committee is reviewing the CIP from financial perspective. Like Josh asked a very good question. If we fund this project 1.2 million, do we have the money for 14 million? Are we going to do a geo bond? Are we going to do a revenue bond? I haven't heard anything. So I feel and the library board, definitely safety. So feel each board, commission, and committee has their perspective, and definitely if council can receive different perspective, they can make the best decision. I don't want to speak for other committee, but I just read their memos. That's their approach.
And so with that, having our unique view, looking things over on a wider basis, as well as even not having full agreement inside the committee, I think reflects that and gives council some good insight into knowing that this is a difficult process. Let's call it, what it is at the beginning, that there's only a certain amount of dollars and more projects that have needs. I think that'll lead to a lot of good conversation in the annual report, where we can talk about our experiences with it and anything we think about the process that we'd want to maybe recommend to city to consider things moving forward. But for completion of this, this would go for city's meeting on next Monday would be when you guys would review it, Steve?
No,
No, we're on a 2-week hiatus.
2-week hiatus?
Yeah, so it'll be
That's because.
mid-July.
yeah.
Well deserved, guys.
July
I did it for
25th.
staff.
July 25th.
And for 30 minutes for council, because they had a very good conversation last night.
All right, so that would mean we would really we could say till the end of this week to have everyone put in your opinions. It's 8.6 on the nose?
Yeah, 8,650,000.
650. So all of us to go individually, I think when we put down on the sheet, James is a full voting member. Peter, I believe you're an alternate. So should we denote that saying these are the 5 voting members? This is the alternate with everyone's?
Doesn't make any difference.
So we'll just put 6 members on there and then have the aggregate of all of them?
I want to
Yeah.
include your feedback.
I didn't remember how that worked.
Yeah.
So okay.
And do we need to call out that James is a non-voting member at this point, or just include all 6 and leave it?
I just don't see this as a formal vote.
Yeah, that's when I was the alternate. I just abstained from voting or making any motions in our official conduct of business. But I still need to read all the materials and participate in the conversations and things like that. I don't know if I was doing that right, but.
Well, and
That's good to know.
this is just following the rules of engagement as well to make sure that we're not violating any or causing any issues. But it sounds like all 6 of us having categories there, plus the one aggregate. What I'll do is I will write up kind of a summary of it, just kind of explaining our conversations that it's a very difficult decision. We weren't in full agreement, but what you'll see is each member is voting plus an aggregate and include your commentary on kind of those prioritizations. Because I thought that was, very well done on saying what's the most important thing. That'll be our submittal letter and we can get it wrapped up if you have that all done by the end of the week.
Suzanne, can I just ask, as one of our longer-serving committee members, does this deviate from previous years? Was there usually a consensus reached versus a kind of aggregate approach?
We didn't have this exercise before.
Okay.
So it's hard to say. I mean, we didn't agree on everything, but we came to, I don't know. Yeah, we were able to submit a report, an annual report to council each year, so.
Thank you.
It seemed to make sense, and we did have a long conversation the prior meeting about everything, which I felt like we had some good discussion.
Ultimately, I think this extra money allows most of the things that we were talking about around the edges to be included. So I'll be interested to see how similar ours look with the extra dollars. It's definitely going to be a lot less nuanced than what our discussion was at $8 million.
So I want to ask a very elementary question. We're going to take the file. We are each going to budget for $8.65 million in capital projects.
Correct.
And then you're going to
Put together, Jenny had a draft of a cover letter. I will use that as a base, kind of explain what we're discussing right now, that, each individual member plus the aggregate, and these are kind of the priorities that we see as a committee that we think are the most important thing.
So how are you going to aggregate it? That's where I'm not connecting the dots.
Just a straight average.
Okay, that helps.
So, yeah.
And do we have the latest version of the document that represented our collective work from the last meeting? Okay.
And if you can send that out with the updated dollar amount for everyone to work off of. Was it a file attached or is it Google Drive saved somewhere?
No, it's file attached.
Do we have the capability of doing a Google Drive just for
I'll find out.
document consistency?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay, do that.
Because if we can throw it up on Google Drive and just access the link, that would just make it a lot easier for.
I don't know.
Thinking about, if you're feeling ambitious, it might be worthwhile to get a meeting in there too, because one person could skew
You will
Yeah.
find
that
out.
average. And I'm happy to help you with that if it.
That's an interesting, but technically I agree with you.
Got to love math.
Although I didn't see any real anomalies, but, well, we were far off on maybe a couple of things.
But they were all in the dollar amount, that 600,000. I think all the
Oh,
big ticket
yeah.
stuff was.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we should get pretty darn close. And Jackie, just for understanding, the basis of the increase is due to what?
We have a 2022 capital improvement plan. So we plan to review this list on a quarterly basis. So we did a review like a month ago to see if there's some, for example, wayfinding. We realized we still have some money, probably $300,000, so we can
From the prior year?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the department feel with this 2023 plan, they are willing to delay or defer or repurpose some of the money for this list.
Nice. Okay, thanks.
Awesome. So we will target, can everyone try this Friday to have that information uploaded into the spreadsheet? We'll look into see if we can't do it in a Google Docs for a shared centralized location. And then I will follow up next week with the letter, and then we should have it wrapped up, ready to go for that meeting on the 20th. Plenty of time to spare. Awesome. All right, so that moves into review and feedback on the process. What did everyone think of it? So as Suzanne said, this is the first time Budget Advisory Committee has been a part of the process. It was kind of, the benefit of not having any past biases, but also the challenge of learning as we were going through it. So I'll open it up to comments and conversations about what you guys thought of it.
I really appreciated our group discussion and how we went through things literally item by item. And I think I felt very comfortable expressing my priorities, but in a way that was, I think, respectful of, I felt like we had a lot of commonality as a group, as much as, obviously some differences. So I really appreciated that. I thought going through the city council meeting, that was a lengthy exercise. Although I learned all about our neighborhoods, including the one I live in. So, but that might have been a little bit less of a time commitment. That would have been welcomed, I think, on my part.
Yeah, I was grateful that we had the schedule beforehand and I showed up at the end of the city neighborhood presentation and got some of the passion from Steve. What's in my neighborhood now? Did that get resolved?
Now called Clayton.
It is.
All right.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Successful.
Yeah. But yeah, knowing the time on it, because it was a big time commitment, that's fantastic.
Cool. I think Suzanne, you and I did the whole thing, didn't we? That whole meeting, because I saw you on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we actually, I think we were the most represented committee there.
Yep.
In addition to you guys on screen, because we had Bill, you were there in person.
I saw some of it.
You saw some of it. Oh,
Yeah, I
you
saw
joined
some
in.
of it,
Yeah.
yeah.
So fantastic to see. And it was great to see that process from that aspect. I did think it was super informative. And so, feedback of the city, like definitely great to have everyone together. And I'd encourage and vote for that in the future too.
Yeah, I agree. I think in addition to what James was just saying, I enjoyed the conversation that we had as well. I think we probably needed the whole meeting for that. I thought that would have been helpful. And then when we started, I think, and it was just kind of learning as we went, but learning like, hey, making sure we flagged items that were kind of, this is something we fund every year. There were items that were like, hey, this is just something we do every year, was good information. Flagging items that we knew that had like funding, additional funding approved, or grants, I should say, that was helpful. I think having those flagged is a good thing, because that helps in the decision process. And then I think all that helped into leading into, me just kind of sitting by myself for a while and going through it, was good. And I thought the comments in the spreadsheet that where, Suzanne, I think, started, that was helpful because it was, kind of refreshing memory. So I thought everybody putting in their comments was good too.
I agree.
I was going to say on that, and this comes back to your email, lesson for next year is either to outright schedule a special meeting to be able to discuss this, so we're not trying to do a presentation plus this discussion, or being more diligent to say if we hit that 7 o'clock hour, we pause and then we get on the schedule to have a special meeting to follow up. I think that also led to this challenge that we are now being a little bit late on getting the report, just because we stepped away from that meeting with the intention of being able to communicate through email limitations with the charter, and then life happens, and here we are a little bit later trying to get it wrapped up. So having that specific time and being more diligent with the calendar, I think will be really beneficial for next year.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to decide right now, I'd propose that we allow this discussion to have its own meeting.
Yep.
And just so I'm clear on the email, the
Open records.
yes, so truly we should not be sharing that information with the email group, or what was sort of
I
the,
mean, we're maintaining that as a record,
got it.
as.
So you were just verifying that we
You're
assumed
not
that
having,
role.
yeah, and then you're not having separate, as long as you're not sharing an email among 3 of you, because once 3 or more are gathered, it's considered an official meeting at the back.
Okay, so we didn't commit a foul by sending the document, given that everyone was on there. Okay, all right. Thanks for noting that. 'Cause-
As long as you were copied, that's kind of.
Got it.
So if we did it without you being copied on it, it becomes problematic because there's no maintenance of the record for open records requests. But, so as long as you're copied on it, we could continue to have those discussions in
Well,
that manner.
it's better, if you're going to have, if you're wanting to have a meeting, it's better to schedule a meeting
Okay.
to discuss everything. Because even technically sending an email is considered, well, if a decision is made, especially during an email, that's considered a meeting.
Gotcha.
And our meetings should be public meetings,
Yes,
right?
they're supposed to be published, yeah.
So,
Not just published, but open to the
Open
public.
to the public, yeah.
and I think managing the schedule next year will help prevent any of those issues a lot better too, to kind of head it off at the pass, if you will.
Yeah, and I hadn't looked at I think it was the state charter, but I just, just one of those technical details.
It is, yeah.
So, thanks.
You're very welcome.
So, and this is where, Steve, with your experience with the finance team, it seems that the capital projects is part capital projects, but part ongoing budget that for whatever reasons is assigned to come out of the capital project funds. And, when we walked into this, I don't think that was as clear to me. And especially as we were going through the review process, it was one of those things that kind of came out along with it. And this is where getting cost to completion. I think what bridge we were talking about that you said it's been deferred for as long as you've been on BAC.
It's union.
It just keeps the can getting kicked down. And to me, that's a big concern because, next year we have $5 million. We allocated all these dollars next year. So what are we cutting next year is already where my mind's going to a little bit. And then what continues to get deferred. And this is also what happens to the stuff that continues to get deferred. Is it just we hope to have another good year in a couple years where we get 10 million and we can solve it? And it doesn't seem that the process, other than being a snapshot on what we have out of the capital projects and what we have to do, really reflects that challenge of the situation. And so I like the way Public Works approaches it, thinking projects, programs, projects, and studies as kind of the three categories, and being able to get to the view, because we're looking at stuff that, the Wayfinder is a great example, not realizing that money got allocated last year that was sitting there essentially earmarked for this task would have made a difference in our decisions, I think, and conversations around them, but we didn't have that insight. And so I guess as kind of a topic of conversation is that change that the city's able to easily implement, where we start to look at these capital projects not as each year we've got to approve. I think of the Inglewood train, it was 15 grand index for inflation as kind of the maintenance, but now they need 2 additional cars. That's a project versus the program of the maintenance of the train. Like, is there a better way to identify that as we're looking at this? And is this something that's going to help the city manage the budget better? We can now start to pool all these projects that keep getting deferred and say, hey, we need to go find a different revenue source for it. So I just think structurally there's some improvements that could be made on the alignment that makes it easier for us to advise on the budget, but more importantly, easier for you guys to manage the budget.
And when we create the matrix for our council's presentation, we revised this presentation a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We broke down all the projects by ongoing or new.
Okay.
And we also grouped similar projects by types, like landscaping, bridges, roads, pavement. Hopefully that will be a little bit easier.
All right.
And I was also thinking, I'm thinking out loud. Here's a question. We want to continue pulling money into the deferred projects or the projects in the backlog, or do we want to invest in other projects to prevent incurring more maintenance costs in the future?
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have the information. We can ask department when they propose the CIP, they can add. Is this recurring maintenance or is new? It's a study. If I invest $5 now, I can prevent from investing $300 for maintenance. Probably give a little more information. And also it's grant funded, so with each item we have more information. Just a thought, just a thought.
And that's exactly where I am. What's our ongoing, truly more or less budget stuff? Not capital project stuff that's in there, and so we can identify that, because again, it goes back to if we allocate money this year with an expense next year with no idea where it's coming from. For these larger projects, we can start to look at individual funding for the projects or cost of completion. It's almost like, is there guardrails that should be put in place to say if the project's above X number of dollars, it should not come from the capital project. Anything above this has to be funded, through alternatives, and it's just about protecting the capital project budget because it is so limited and it's now wearing so many hats.
I think SURF is a good example of sort of what you're proposing, which
Okay.
is, we buy vehicles out of the SURF fund, and departments that use those vehicles pay into the SURF fund. So there's a planned replacement cost.
Mm-hmm.
So every year they're paying for the cost of the vehicle, which is actually the replacement cost. When the vehicle fully depreciates in 4 or 5 years, theoretically, there's enough money in the SURF fund to replace that vehicle.
And that's where it comes down to, as we were looking at it, we only saw this year's numbers, not projections of what the next couple of years are. And so that project would actually have, hey, here's the project, but here's how it refunds.
Right.
I'm more apt to, it's easier to support those types of projects knowing that income's gonna be coming in, or like you were saying, an income offset versus, there's an element that we're just kind of guessing in the dark on some of this information.
Well, and some of it is just as basic as it sounds, operational expense, not capital expense.
And then the conversation next year is, do these operational budgets stay the same, increase or decrease? Different context for that conversation. So we're not funding something this year and then unknowingly cutting the maintenance next year, which is going to lead to longer term impacts if we do that. And it's what's the risk if we decrease your capital project funding by 10%? What's the benefit of, and we can now incorporate that into our ongoing conversations too as we're meeting with departments.
So let me ask a question just for our committee's sake, because I'm sure the city's doing this, but how do we assess sort of the performance of the budget on maybe an annual basis? I assume is all that's necessary. Or is that something that we necessarily haven't done in the past or haven't been asked to do? It sounds like maybe, but just curious.
So from a council perspective, we get monthly financial reports, and they're kind of a gauge of the health of the city's finances. So we anticipated this much revenue, we got this much. We anticipated this many expenses, and we got this much. When I see a large deviation on those reports between anticipated and actual, that leads to some questions. Do we have a problem with the way we structured the budget, or do we have a windfall of revenue, or was there some unexpected cost? So on a monthly basis, just from a pure numbers standpoint, that's what we're doing. As far as success or failure of the projects, we do get occasional strategic plan updates, and all those projects are listed on the strategic plan. That's one of the measures is, are we ahead, behind, or, stuck on this? And Tim could probably speak a little more to that. But those are kind of the check-ins on a monthly or quarterly basis for us on council to make sure that everything is moving the way it's supposed to.
And that's where we get deferred projects, additional budget back into the capital through those check-ins.
The checking, we only review the financial for the general fund,
Okay,
but for capital improvement fund, just like annually we do the budget. Yeah. Then we have a quarterly review on the status of capital project.
That's more.
More
internal-
financial,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
more
financial.
internal review
Do you have
versus-
enough money or have your priorities be changed?
because any allocated dollars not yet spent, as well as, the future dollar conversations, I think that would give us a little bit more backwards view that you're looking at.
Just a thought, I mean, certainly we don't want to make it more work for somebody in the city or what have you, but maybe it would be to our advantage next February, whatever the date is, to just see what actually came out of this.
And Tim, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add to what Mayor Pro Tem Ward said about the strategic plan. So we have about, I think, right now about 160 different projects in the plan, and we worked really hard to make sure this year they tied to work of departments and also to the budgetary process. And so every quarter we do a presentation to council, and so it really, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, it's a check-in opportunity. So we use the kind of old green, yellow, red status symbols to show whether a project is on track, off track or delayed or there's an issue. We also show projects that are completed. Council at that time also has an opportunity to weigh in and modify projects. Sometimes staff recommends modifications, removals, things like that. And so we typically do it the month after a quarter ends. So quarter 2 ends at the end of June. So the next report, which is the first one under the new plan, will be on July 18th, and that's for quarter 2. That will be before council. And then we also publish the report on the website as well for everyone to see.
Thanks, Tim. I'll start just looking at those just for the group's benefit and my benefit. Thanks.
But it sounds like the big recap is overall, it was a pretty successful, be it a little late experience. The group discussions, being able to come together on that, we'll get the backfill of our individual numbers for that to be submitted. We'll be a little bit more thoughtful with our time commitments, both preparing for that meeting, so everyone knows what's the relevant time that we're going to be there, so we can manage that, as well as the recap meetings. And then I think there is an opportunity, and this actually segues into the annual report. I think the way to present this information back to council is through the annual report, and discuss kind of what we think about. Here's some ways that we experience our thoughts on this process and included it as a section in the report, so we can have that codified as a part of our process going back into them. Before we move to that annual report and this specific section of the report, is there any more feedback on capital projects process that we kind of want to denote thinking about for next year?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Just in general, how do you feel about participating in the capital projects process? Do you think it's worthwhile for the committee, helpful, not helpful?
I'm in favor of it. You're looking at Josh, but I'm going to answer.
and I was going to look around the room first before I spoke up. So
I feel good about it. I'm glad that we got to be included.
I agree.
I mean, I felt frustration for you guys, because it is not an easy thing, especially with the challenges that are inherently built in. No, I thought it was incredibly eye-opening. It was fantastic, and really understanding how that supports the wider budget as we're going through this next cycle. Because this was the first complete cycle for me this past year. Even looking back to the last year, I just understand so much more because of the capital projects conversations too. So I think it's really important to be a part of BAC, and overall the process was very, very well managed from that meeting at City Council, having everyone together, as well as the feedback and the support from finance team. So.
If I can add, I think there's also an indirect benefit to the community, because as we have casual, informal conversations with fellow citizens when we're just out and about living our day-to-day lives, I think we can also speak to this process. So if we're talking to somebody and they're talking about why the parking lots aren't maintained, then I can say, well, yeah, I mean, we advise council to skip out on that this year in favor of, another project. But it's just getting more education and involvement out there, getting more hands in the pot.
Awesome.
I know my whole block now is aware of why our water smells and tastes the way it does. I have literally bored them, I think, to tears on that. Help us understand.
I just have everyone be happy we've got Peter Van Eck. Just be happy. We're in good hands. We got the right person leading us to solve these problems. Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Steve. So moving into the annual report, Suzanne, I'm actually going to ask you to give a quick, you've done this the most times, a quick overview of what the report is. I've talked a little bit about it, but kind of your thoughts about it and the best way to approach it.
Yeah, so what we've done in the past is, as a group, speak to, we'll have a meeting where we highlight the topics that we want to speak to in the report. We might have 12 issues that we want to present to council. We whittle it down to 3 to 5 to 7. The report's historically been about 5 pages or so. Does that sound about right? Yeah. And we will maybe break into individuals or pairs who actually want to draft that section of the report. So again, we're avoiding the Quora. So let's say we want to talk about fiber optics or something techie, like maybe that might be a section that, I'm not volunteering you, but that might be a piece that you would speak to. And, you might write a paragraph or two as to why the back feels that is important. And, I might speak to something about Parks and Rec and something that Director Underhill presented to us about one of her needs. And so I might draft a paragraph or two there. I think in our last report, we had our 5 key topics, but then at the end, we just added a few short bullet points, like we support this, that, and the other thing. We also try to add just some positive feedback and accolades toward the directors or council. So that's kind of the structure of the report. So 5-ish topics where 1 or 2 members focus on each of those topics in terms of drafting the report. And then we'll have a whole meeting, dedicated meeting, where we pull it up on the screen and we review it in its entirety.
Can we take positions that maybe are not precisely related to the budget per se? So for instance, one of my takeaways from this last year is that on our city's infrastructure, we're going to continue to fall further and further behind, right? Based on what can be allocated each year. And so can we, for instance, recommend that the city really look at issuing bonds or something like that? Or is that getting out of our lane?
No, that's within our lane.
I think that circles back around to the capital projects conversation,
Yeah.
because, right now we know $1.8 million is coming out of that fund each year for road maintenance, and that's not enough. Like, what happens when we shift that off of there to the bond, what that means for our capital projects experiences and budget moving forward. And so I think focusing on that is imperative actually for us to do. The other ones that pop up is, if we've all seen that text in the survey by now, 6 new patrol officers, as well as the 1.8 for alternative policing and for the courts. That again is a significant expenditure, but if we get that on bonds and we support that, or if you're against that or a different way to do it, that's absolutely a part of where I think we should put it in, as well as we talked about that funding, whether it should be all mill, all sales tax, a combination of both, what percentage. So we definitely want to include that as a part of our purview.
I think
Go
ahead.
I was just saying, would we want to avoid that latter part of the discussion? Because are we then treading into policy, which is really more the elected officials' decision? We're saying we know that there needs to be some mechanism, right, for additional revenue to address some of these big needs. Is that where we stop and we say, it's up to the city to decide what is the better issue in terms of bond or sales tax or some combination, or can we even go that far as to issue a recommendation?
I think we walk up to our line of expertise that we're comfortable doing it. I'm comfortable saying, like, based off of what they said, a mill versus a sales tax, it's got to be some hybrid approach, right? Because it affects us. It affects our budget on how we're putting in, and it affects what the city can do, and it's going to affect passage. And so if we think structuring in a certain way will be better for passage, it's our job to advise council on that. Now, on the policy side, they make the ultimate decisions. They can say, this isn't going to work, this doesn't fit to it, you have no idea what you're talking about with actual financing, we're not going to do this. And that's ultimately, their job when reviewing this. And so putting it in there, especially if it's in our realm of expertise where we're comfortable commenting on it, I think it's appropriate.
We're an advisory committee. Council doesn't have to listen to us at all. So.
Fair enough.
Question though, on the topic of potentially advising the city on issuing bonds, are we responsible for coming up with the amount?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
but you could say.
Yeah, maybe like a ballpark.
We've identified these 10 projects, they total this amount of dollars, we would highly recommend these projects for bonding.
Frankly, that's where my mind is on capital projects for future years. Take these projects and find alternative financing. Our preference would be a combination of mill and sales tax or a geo bond or something like that. And so we can at least give guidance on how to do it, but ultimately how far deep they want to go into our advice. But really the thing is, do we have these projects that we know we need to go do something for them?
we can't keep deferring these bridges year in and year out. We've got to be able to calculate the cost of completion of the bridges, and that's going to be done better under alternative finance. And I say alternative financing very broadly, but better than out of the capital project bucket.
I would think we could also weigh, I think, weren't there like 3 options on each of those question sets? Was that another possibility we could weigh in and say, like, among the 3, levels of funding that you're proposing to raise, we think this is the most appropriate one based on what we know about the budget and gaps in it? Because I think, am I remembering that correctly? Didn't they have, like, if Inglewood were to raise X number of dollars, are you supportive, not supportive? And then there was another level of funding that would impact taxes this much, supportive, not. I feel like that's how it was.
The sales tax mill and then a GO with a 10-year payback. So the GO would have only been a 10-year. And then the question is, what do you do moving forward after that 10 years? That was my read of those different options.
Didn't they offer though also different funding targets?
On the roads, it's what, 3.6 to keep it at a 6, like the bottom tier, and 4.8 to get it up to the next tier of the ranking or the ratings on it. And so there was that variance of it. I think for the patrol officers and the alternative policing funding, it was just the 2 options, sales versus mill levy. But those 2 things being separate, I would argue, put those together, unified, protection, community policing that looks at everything. And it also brings the police into it, where it's not police versus this, it's that combined collaborative approach. And I think that's a better way to think about it. And you're going to get more people who will support both funding if you look at it that way. If you give them a choice, this or that, I think people are going to make a choice and really look at it as competing dollars. And so this is where in the report, I think we talk about viewing this holistically is a chance to think about it differently. That gets the most dollars for the most things, where it's not you're choosing one or the other, it's always a combined approach.
I always think of things in terms of return on investment. But yeah, I think when we start to draft our report or outline it, we're just gonna have to look at each strategic plan outcome and as a group figure out what speaks to us the most.
Which is a good point. Do we now structure the report? And last year it was just, we figured out the structure based off of the conversations. Sounds like it was done like that previously. Do we want to have this report structured under each strategic outcome and have any commentary under that?
Well, I'll throw this out there. I feel we should, because that's why we completely restructured our meetings this year.
I agree.
Any opposition to that?
So there'll be the strategic outcome commentary on each, and then we'll have kind of a catch-all section for capital projects process and anything else that doesn't fit in there. All right, any questions about the process of the annual report idea, like kind of what we're about to walk into before we think about who wants to cover each strategic outcome and what main conversations we want to be able to cover in the report? So let's start with topics to cover, and we'll kind of put them into the strategic outcomes as we go through it. Are we good with that approach?
I would have done it the other way around.
Or do we want to?
I don't feel strongly, but I would have done it the other way around.
Either way works. My mind's not as benchmarked towards the strategic outcomes yet, so trying to think about where they fit into versus thinking that was why I was starting with the topics, but either way. We should probably pull up the strategic outcome list as well. Does somebody have that they can pull up on the screen easily? Jenny?
I have a feeling I won't be able to share my screen, but I can go through the list. We have neighborhoods, we've got governance, we have infrastructure and transportation, we have community well-being,
Safety,
safety,
economy,
local economy,
and sustainability.
Sustainability. Shall I write them on the board?
That would be nice.
Okay, we're good?
No, that would be nice.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I missed one of them, so I won't ask you to repeat the whole list.
I'm gonna backtrack though and kind of agree with your approach, because the one common theme across all those was everyone was having trouble with recruitment and retention of employees.
Mhm.
And that seems to cover all of it. Was that not discussed in every single meeting we had?
So I think it's even more of an interesting conversation now as we're heading into or are in a recession, as compared to when we were having some of those conversations, you know, and you talk about the Great Resignation and things like that, and you're starting to see things shift now. You know, I think starting to see some shift just kind of in general in the world across industries.
And even through that context, viewing this as a massive opportunity because we are gonna see a shift in the market. It's just with everything moving around. And is this an opportunity to better right-size the benefits, get in great quality people right now that you can keep for the long term? So thinking about how it plays into the long-term strategic plan. Because cost of hiring and training new employees is, you know, a big cost, especially with the high turnover.
Well, and even the U6 unemployment, I looked just a day or two ago. Actually saw Daniel briefly, but it was just 6.7% for the U6 unemployment, which really means, yeah, this Great Resignation and for other reasons, truly, employment, the availability of good employees has really been reduced.
Yep. Now, employment lags in recession, so, you know, what does this mean in 6 months as well? And this is where we get into, you know, what does this present as an opportunity, and how important do we think it is to jump on the opportunity with doing, because we already know the pay is a big issue, right? Sizing pay, focusing on benefits, looking for other employee wellness things. Just having more dollars allocated to be able to respond to those employee surveys to meet the needs of what they're looking for. So recruitment and retention's a big one. We've got the capital improvement project process.
One of the notes I had written down was kind of lumped under community outreach. Several groups were talking about, you know, just the ability, and I'm looking at my notes here, to be able to reach out to the community using professional services in order to do that. That was one of the topics I had written down. And I think related to that, I think it was under neighborhoods, but had talked about a staff member. Well, I don't know if it was directly tied to it, but I remember neighborhoods had talked about needing staff to help handle some of the requests that were coming in from a comms perspective. I don't know if anybody else recalls that, but I had written that down.
So I agree with that. I think that's talking about community outreach and engagement, being able to both proactively educate, but also things like, you know, block up the street, they had a block party and they had the trailer out there. And so it's great to see that out in the community. I know that we've got the small things like the backyard, hosted backyard movie rental, you know, programs like that with, I think this aligns with the neighborhood, like prioritizing this community outreach to build our, you know, strong community feel. So other members of our community get to hear the cool stuff that Inglewood's doing that we hear about every month. And so.
Yeah, and I think to me that also includes, you know, I just got something in the mail again about, you know, kind of the water report, but, you know, the water department being a good example has sent out a lot of communications or been available when you go to, you know, one of the events or things like that. I mean, to me, that's all part of community outreach. I don't know if it's technically classified differently, but I mean, I think those types of things are important too, kind of in that education realm.
So as we're writing that section, and this is a chance to talk about the great things that we have seen and where we want to see continued improvement. And we support, more thoughts and dollars going to this type of things. I think about the street sweeping, like the information just getting out there, having flyers on the door and the approach of street sweeping to make sure cars are moved, but doing it in a fair manner for the busy citizen. I think we do a really, really good job at in the city. And making sure we continue communications like that, I think is an important part of our notes here in this section. I agree. I think public safety, specifically knowing that police is looking for more patrol officers, as well as last year, the restorative justice and the alternative policing was a big part of our report, kind of building on that. And again, looking at them as kind of a combined topic, I think has some long-term benefit. So public safety is one topic. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's a popular or a highly profiled social issue, so I think that has some relevance. I'll be back there.
One of the things that could really help me personally, and I can't speak for all of council on the subject of public safety, is what would you have us do differently? So what are we doing well today, and what would you have us do differently? A lot of programs are very expensive, as you know, and we just approved a new tax ballot initiative, sales tax, primarily directed towards public safety programs earlier this week. But the solution from a citizen standpoint, if you have feedback, what would you have us do and how much are you willing to pay for it, or what do you think it should cost? That would be helpful in this cycle.
So one thing I would be interested in, and this is, again, the level of our involvement and purview is better ROI numbers on certain things. I think about this is, right off of public safety, but what is our return on investment of dollars going into, punitive justice, where appropriate versus directing away from the criminal justice system. I think about the reports coming out of the STARS program of Denver, where they're seeing, the reduction of crime, the reduction of man hours, all the benefits there, and having a better idea on, where we can get with large budget expenditures, these benchmarks to see, are we getting an ROI? Because that could help make better decisions on future budget decisions, knowing that, hey, we split available dollars, 70-30 to patrol officers versus, alternative, but we believe if we increase this, that's going to save us X dollars over here because of that recidivism expenses, things like that. And so, that's one of many areas where we saw the train that exploded in its ROI last year because of the increased interest. Are we expecting that to move forward, and what investments should we now make into that as a result of it? So better insight into ROI on specific things, I think, is something that would be really useful. So we got recruitment and retention, capital projects process, community outreach engagement, public safety, ROI. What other big areas are top of mind that we'd want to discuss? And this is where we can think, do we want to have a list tonight to move forward? Do we want to, looking at the schedule moving forward, we've got a meeting on the 26th of July, and this is back to City Council on August 1st. So ideally at that meeting on the 26th of July, we all get together to review the final report, make any edits. So do we want to think about having a meeting between now and then to work on it or to spend some time thinking about what other categories we want to have in here, and then assign everyone sections to do it at the next meeting where we can come back on the 26th to review everything.
I'll just mention, just for the group's benefit, I was just talking to Jenny, we didn't finish our conversation, but I'm leaving July 14th and I'm gone until after August 1st. So I'll be available, I'll have email access and I can do that, but I'm gonna be in Europe, so I won't be close.
Yeah, enjoy that.
I'm going to, I haven't been in a few years.
A lot of people haven't.
Just letting you know, so if we're gonna do a meeting before the 13th or earlier would be best for me, but just letting you know, and I don't necessarily need to be there.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that.
Well, and I think in light of that, is there anything that that you want to be sure is in that report so that you are represented?
Well, I can add something with my budget update by Friday, if that's helpful.
I just want to be inclusive and respectful.
Totally, I really would like to think about it a little bit and see what other people are partial to doing, and I'm happy to contribute any way I can.
Any other thoughts about how we best manage the process over the next month?
And I'm going to be leaving town day after tomorrow and out for the next 2 weeks. So I'll be back after you get back. Not as exciting, just Canada in my case, but
Nice.
I can dial in. I'll just be one time zone away. So
I got my vacation out of the way last week, so I'm going to propose that we schedule a bonus meeting. Whether it is what do we want to talk about meeting, or if it's a drafting meeting, I'm not sure yet.
So looking at the calendar, July 12th, it's Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month. So is that an issue with Code Next?
No,
Nope.
thank you, but no.
Would July 12th work for everyone's calendar?
Yeah, I should be okay with that.
We'll always have a virtual setup. Yeah. So anybody that needs to be virtual.
Might need to be virtual on that day. My wife has a.
Can we just have a virtual meeting? Do you guys prefer to come in, or?
Yeah. Is it fine to just schedule virtual and just do it that way?
We can have a virtual meeting.
So we'll do this at 5:15. And we will, so.
Based on the rules, could we, Jenny, could we all send like a list out to each other of topics that we would like to have? So we just kind of have that ready. So we're not just brainstorming topics, like we are now. It's like, okay, here's our list, of 15 topics, and then start cutting them down and assigning them? Or is that against rules?
Yep, or you can just send them to me and I'll compile the list and send it out to everybody. If we just can get that out first part of next week.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
I like that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So if everybody could have it by maybe the 5th of July, that work?
It does.
So I'll include the topics we discussed tonight on my list. So we'll just build off of that. If we double up, no problem. But I've got all those written down, and we'll have that back to Jenny by July 5th. That is next Tuesday after the 4th. So ideally by Friday, but July 5th for the list of topics, and we'll have that aggregated as a starting point. Okay. Awesome. So that means our 2 pieces of homework are finish up any budget numbers, any changes for those of us who've already put it in. James, you're going to get your numbers added. I think that needs to be added to the spreadsheet still. Jenny, we're going to look to get that on Google Docs so everyone can work from a centralized location so we don't have document management issues. We'll look for that email coming out. $8.65 million is the number for that. And then our list of topics for the 5th, that's to get ready for the virtual meeting on the 12th. We'll go through the list of topics, finalize what we want to discuss on, assign who's writing each section, And then at that point, we'll have all sections complete by the 26th. We'll get together in that meeting, be able to review the full report. So let's target to have sections complete by the 19th, maybe the Tuesday prior. That gives us 1 week to complete it. Or we'll choose a different date. That way people can read it before we get to that group meeting on the 26th. And then that should have everything wrapped up. Nothing to worry about after the 26th, so it's back to council before the 1st.
Yeah, 25th, July 25th, council meeting.
We will have,
Oh, you
we will have the
mean
capital
26th.
project before the 25th. Yep, so that will be wrapped up by end of this week, and I'll get the submittal letter by next week, yeah.
And this formal report for the formal annual report, though, aside from the budget, goes out August 1st, or is that truly the date?
It will go, and are we presenting it again to council this year? And what is that presentation date? Because I know last year we actually.
I think the presentation date we have is August 1st.
Okay, so August, so on the 1st, we will actually get up, and whoever can join us that night and present a section, we'll have all that assigned. It's a chance to have some questions back from council on their reading and review of it as well. So does that mean it's got to be, if?
Well, we'll need to have, so after our meeting on the 26th, we'll need to have a finalized document for on that Wednesday, the next day.
Gotcha. So the 26th, we'll have the document completely finalized, is the goal of that.
Yep.
And then based off of that discussion, we can find out who's going to be there on the 1st, wants to present in front of council for specific areas. I imagine you're going to want to zoom in for that from Europe.
Well, my brother always wants to stay longer than I want to stay, so we'll see.
Right.
My flight, I think, is the 1st, so we'll see.
No, don't try and do that one.
No, I know, but I kind of wanted to be here for it anyway, so I'm sure y'all don't need me.
There's always next year.
Yeah,
And there's
next year.
plenty of
Well,
council
well-
meetings you can attend.
Yes,
Please do not come on August 1st.
if I'm back, I'll come.
So, and then after that, we'll be rolling into a new cycle in August, and use that August meeting to catch up and be able to figure out the best way moving forward. When do we elect new president or chair, vice chair?
It'll be on the 26th meeting on July 26th.
Is when we will elect that? All right. So I will say, I would like to step down. Life's too crazy as chair, or to serve as chair moving forward, especially with a toddler at home. So if anybody's interested, wants to meet up, ask any questions about my experiences serving, absolutely enjoyed it for the last year. But life dictates that I'd probably be better served as just a member of the committee for me moving forward. So I did want to share that for anybody thinking about whether to step up for chair for the next cycle.
And we'll do those nominations in July meeting.
In July, yes,
Okay,
26th. Yeah.
And I've served my terms.
So you are not eligible?
I'm not eligible, right? Right.
2 years, I think, right? You have to take a 2-year break.
Yep.
I was gonna say, is that for any position or you've been off for at least a year and a half, so.
Is yours concluded in July?
Oh, no, as far as chair goes. I served my
Oh.
terms as chair.
Yeah. So have you, I think all you have to do is give a year maybe.
Okay.
So you are eligible.
I know, we've got plenty of new members.
We do.
who can serve as chair.
Thank you.
I will also say,
Oh.
on top of this board, I'm on another board for another nonprofit, and with work and a newborn. It is a little hard, so, but next month we'll all kind of converse about it, but.
Okay, so Bill and James and Peter. Think hard about it.
Is the alternative allowed to serve as the
I
chair?
don't know if I can.
Oh, yeah, that's right. No, sorry.
And I need to check on that, but I think I am an alternative.
You are an
Because I remember when James came in, we had kind of the same conversation.
So it's James and Bill. We're looking at you two.
Come on, guys.
So everyone's putting their cards on the table. I'm a president and CEO, so I unfortunately chair a lot of things. But if Min-Kyu's unable to continue in the vice chair role, I would consider that, but only that role. I am not experienced enough to do the chair position.
Come on, you don't need a lot of experience. I figured
You
stumbled my way
you
through
guys
it
have
last
raised the
year.
bar, you and so.
So, we'll just confirm all the rules about everything. Bill, we're all looking at you now. Figure out how you feel about it.
Should we just nominate
and-
them?
It's a bad
we'll have-
connection. I don't know what you're saying there, Josh.
Make this easy.
Say default,
Yeah.
Just like
What I
the
get for not being there, right?
Coming with the right and win will be Bill. Right to it for ballot. So, but we'll finalize that on the 26th as well, and just make sure everything's kosher with the rules as we go through it. Members' choice. Anything anybody wants to bring up?
The volunteer appreciation event at Pirates Cove was nice. Thanks again for making that happen, city staff. And I'm looking forward to the alternative plans for 4th of July on Monday, even though they won't involve fireworks, but I'm glad we're still having an event.
I will say I do appreciate the thoughtfulness of not having an event. It's never an easy decision, but especially with how hot it's been, you know, it's a good decision from my point of view. Sad to miss Pirates Cove, but when bedtime's at 7 o'clock, that's more important.
Yeah, last year she was expecting.
It's still expecting, yeah, so, but, awesome. Anything else?
I have one item, just an open invitation, coffee or breakfast. Any members who want to join, love to get to know y'all. Don't know too many of you too well, so just email me. We'll grab breakfast.
Perfect. All right, that covers everything for tonight. We'll see you online on July 12th, and make sure we all do our homework.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.